My name's Nick. I'm 22 years old, and I've been living in this area for the last 18 years of my life, and this is my story. About 4.5 years ago, a man named Jeff Warren was waking up to a normal, typical Tuesday morning and getting ready for his work day, and went off on his way to another normal day at work. And as he was driving along the road, he noticed something in the distance. And as he got closer and closer, he could tell that there was some what looked like metal in the middle of the road, and it was still about like 200-300 yards off. And he kept driving, and sure enough, he got about 100 yards away, and he noticed there was like this car in the middle of this road. It wasn't just a car, but it was this logging truck. This logging truck was just sitting in the middle of a road, and it was mangled, completely totaled. And so he was kind of shocked at this moment, and he pulls off to the side of the road, right? And he's thinking to himself, okay, what's going on? And he walks over to the logging truck in the middle of the road, and he sees that the driver is still in there. And so he jumps up on the side of the truck and sticks his head in the window and kind of puts his hand on the man's shoulder. And at this point, this man's barely there. He's kind of mumbling. He's in a lot of shock, and he just looks at him. He goes, "Hey, are you okay? What happened? Like, what's going on? Like, your car is just totally mangled here in the middle of the road. Is there something I can do for you? I just called 911. They're on their way." And the driver in the logging truck just kind of looks at him, and he says, "There's another car." And he just he points across the road about 60 feet, and Jeff turns around, and he sees that there's this car sticking out at the end of this ditch. And so he jumps off the logging truck and starts running across the road to this, what looks like the end of this Honda Accord. And he gets to the edge of the road and looks down in this ditch, and sure enough, there's this car completely destroyed. And it's on fire, and it's smoking. And he kind of takes a deep breath, because he's afraid, and he's afraid of what's going to be down there. Is that person going to be alive? What's going on there? And so he takes kind of a deep breath, and he starts going down the ditch. And as he gets closer, he can see there's someone in the car. But this car is so crushed that there's about this much space for a hand to reach in to pull back the airbag. And so he sticks his head down, and he reaches his hand in, and he pulls this airbag away from this person's face. And that was the first time that my eyes met with his.
This elementary school parking lot turned into a medevac landing zone today. First responders were on the scene quickly, providing medical care.
But I thought it was a fatality when I saw it.
As accidents go, it was about as bad as it can get. A crash head-on into a logging truck.
The logging truck was totaled.
Insurance agent Jeff Warren just happened to be driving along Kelly Road when he saw the grinding crash. From Sky King, you could see the damage.
I really thought it was a one-car accident.
But Jeff quickly saw there was another car, this car, in a ditch and on fire. He was convinced no one could have survived, but still he ran across the street, grabbing a bucket, filling it with water, putting the fire out.
And after the third bucket, I heard him start to scream.
It was the driver of the car. He was alive, a young man who said his name was Nick.
I was in shock, and I was in so much pain. I remember just moaning, and I remember my eyes just saying everything that they needed to say, which was, "Help me, help me." I was trapped in this burning car, and I wasn't sure if I was going to live. And of course, Jeff is receiving all of this information and now sees that this boy is in this car and in fact is alive, and he's potentially going to burn if he can't get him out, but there's nothing he can do, and he's panicking. He's wondering when the ambulances and the fire trucks are going to get here, and they're still on their way. And he kind of steps back from the car, and all of a sudden he feels this hand on his shoulder, right? And he turns around, and there's this man just there. And he looks back over the ditch to up across the ditch to see the logging truck to make sure it's not the driver who's gotten out of his car. But no, the driver's still in his logging truck, just still in shock, kind of grasping the wheel. And there's just this other man here. And he just looks at Jeff and he says, "Jeff, you got to put this fire out or this kid's going to burn." He's like, "Follow me." So he reaches his hand out, and Jeff grabs his hand, and they walk out of the ditch, and they start walking down this road. And they get to the edge of this road, and there's this driveway, and their front gate has this huge bolt on it. And this man that's with Jeff, he's holding his hand, and he takes his other hand on this gate, and he just pushes on the bolt, and the bolt opens, and the gate just swings wide open. And then sure enough, right there in their driveway, this random stranger's driveway, there's a 5-gallon bucket with a hose in it. And so Jeff just runs over to the house, he turns on the water of this stranger's home, fills up the bucket of water with the hose, and runs back to my car and pours it on my engine. He does that 3 times. Finally, the fire is out. Meanwhile, I'm in my car, and I don't know what's happening. I can feel the heat coming. I can still smell the smell of the battery acid. I can still taste the blood and the sweat and the fear. Fear that was so tangible. I mean, you could just feel it. And I remember in that moment crying out to God because I was so afraid. I was afraid I wasn't going to see my family again. I remember thinking of my 3 little siblings, and that possibility of not being able to say goodbye to them, and to my parents. What would my family think if I were to die? But there was this point, as Jeff was away, there was this point where I didn't care anymore, and I cried out to God, and I said, God, take me home. I don't want to be here anymore. I can't deal with this pain. Take me home. And I remember God just, in that moment, just this still, small, quiet voice. It's like everything just went into slow motion, and just time froze and stood still for a moment. And God's voice said to me, Nick, it is not my will for you to die. It is my will for you to live. And it was such a simple thing for him to say, but it was so powerful within my spirit. And I just knew that I was going to live and that I could trust him. I had no idea at this moment of the extent of my injuries, but I remember just sitting in that car waiting, smelling that battery acid, smelling the smoke of the fire in my car, and just trusting that God was going to save me. And sure enough, Jeff comes back with this man, and they start pouring buckets of water on my car, and the fire goes out, and Jeff leans in and he actually prays with me. And after he's done praying with me, he turns around, and the man that was with him just is gone. He just disappeared. He's no longer there. And sure enough, the firefighters show up, and the ambulance shows up, and it takes about 41 minutes to get me out of my car. And they actually had to saw me out because I was so trapped within the metal of my car. The chief of the fire department said it was the hardest thing he's done in 30 years. And they saw me out. They put me on an ambulance to a nearby school where they extracted me in a helicopter to Harborview. And it was incredible. And I remember just those times and those moments in the hospital, and working through so much. But to kind of bring this story full circle, about 2 weeks into my hospital, Jeff Warren, the man that was there and prayed for me and really saved my life, he comes to the hospital and he says, Nick, I have to tell you this story. And really, it's the story that I just shared with you. And he talks about the man that was there, and he goes, Nick, there was this man that just appeared out of nowhere, and he led me to this place to take the where the bucket was, and to fill it up and put the fire out. And he's like, Nick, I think it was an angel. I think God, he's like, I don't know how it works. It's just some mystery, but I'm a Christian too. I believe in this, and I just can't explain it, but I think somehow God sent an angel to show me how to save your life. And he's like, I've been trying to find you for the last 2 weeks because I just wanted to tell you that. But he's like, something happened that day, and I can't really describe it. And when you hear something like that, you really don't know how to respond. But it was that moment that brought me back to that time God whispered to me in the car, Nick, it's my will for you to live. It's not my will for you to die. And as time went on in the recovery process in the hospital, we actually started linking more and more incredible miracles just to that story. Some of those just involved the way the car crashed and how his hand was in that to protect me. I don't know if you know anything about physics, but a massive logging truck ramming into a small Honda Accord at 45 miles per hour pretty much means that it should eat it for lunch. But as my car came around the bend and we collided head on, there was so much force in my car, somehow it actually ended up lifting the back end of the logging truck. And when that force came back down, it transferred through the front end of the logging truck and ended up launching my car. And that's what made it spin and roll into the ditch 60 feet away from the actual impact of the crash. But during that time, my seat snapped, and of course I'm rolling, so my roof is collapsed, and I'm literally within inches of my roof. But if my seat hadn't have snapped, my head would have been decapitated. Another incredible thing was the steering wheel. Instead of it being completely crushed into my chest cavity, it was actually all the way over to the right. In fact, the whole dashboard just kind of warped to the right side of me. And so I dodged all of that going into my chest and collapsing my lungs. And then breaking your femurs is a brutal thing, and you really only have about 20 minutes to live because you lose so much blood. But because the car smashed together and did that with my legs in the middle of it, all of that pressure was built on my femurs, and so even though they were completely snapped in half, there was no place for the blood to go because the pressure was keeping them in. So yes, brutal ways of God's providence and God's grace in that, but it really was a grace and a providence, because without those things happening, I would have been killed in an instant. And it just reminds me of those moments of God saying, it's my will for you to live. And his hand was in that, and he was going to see that through. I remember even one time about 3 weeks in, being actually pretty resentful towards God and pretty upset. Not pretty upset, I mean devastatingly so. I was furious with him, and I kept telling God, of all things, why a logging truck, God? Like, why a logging truck? That's the worst thing I could have hit. And I was particularly having one day where I was just really angry, and I was yelling at my parents, and I turned away the visitors that had come to see me. And I had an old friend later that afternoon come in, and I remember him saying, Nick, I've got kind of a heavy message for you, but I think that I need to tell you the truth. So he came over, and I remember him just kind of kneeling next to the side of my bed, and he looked at me and he said, Nick, I know you can't do this, but if I was in your shoes and I could get out of your bed, I would be on my knees thanking God that I hit a logging truck. And I remember looking at him like, what are you talking about? Thanking God that I hit a logging truck? And he said, yes, because that logging truck was the best thing that you could have hit. And all of a sudden I just started thinking about the other things that I could have collided with. I could have hit a mom in a minivan with her kids, on her way to soccer practice, or someone riding their bike on the side of the road. And I could be facing so much more than just the brokenness physically, but a deep brokenness within my spirit, a responsibility of ending someone's life, or just causing more damage than I would be able to handle and have control over. And thankfully, the driver in the logging truck was completely okay, and it was just me that had to work through all of the injuries. But yeah, he took my wreckage and turned it into redemption. And that process never ends when we're following Jesus, and that's still happening now. And I just love that we can really trust Him, and I just love that story because it's kind of the heartbeat of my life, and it always aligns me and orients me to what's really important, and it gives me hope because I know that He saved me from death, and He saved me from a physical death, but He's saved us from a spiritual death as well, and we get to celebrate that. And I'm just so thankful to be here to share this story even now. It's a miracle to be alive.